If someone had told me that a single moment could change the course of my life, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I am, sitting in the ruins of the life I built, haunted by the choices I made. My name is Evelyn, and this is the story of how I lost everything. For 11 years, Daniel and I were a team. At least, that's what I told myself. He was my husband, my partner, and the man I thought I'd grow old with. But over time, his career took center stage, and I became a distant second. It started gradually: longer hours at the office, late-night calls, and frequent business trips. Before I knew it, I was spending most of my days alone, filling the silence with books and long walks. I told myself it was normal, that this was what love looked like after so many years. But deep down, I was lonely. One chilly evening, I went to my favorite cafe, a quiet spot I visited to escape the emptiness of our home. I was seated by the window, sipping a latte, when he walked in. Adrian. He had an air of quiet confidence and a smile that lit up the room. He asked if he could join me, and I said yes. We started talking about books, art, and life. His voice was warm, his words thoughtful, and for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. When I walked home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Adrien became a regular at the cafe, and so did I. Our conversations grew deeper, our laughter more frequent. One evening, he brought me a book he thought I'd like. "I noticed you were reading something similar last time," he said, handing it to me. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. Daniel hadn't paid attention to the things I loved in years. Then there was the time Adrien surprised me with a visit to a local art gallery. He knew I used to paint but hadn't picked up a brush in years. "You should create again," he said, his eyes full of encouragement. We spent the evening wandering the gallery, talking about the pieces that moved us. He made me feel alive, like the person I used to be before life became so routine. Meanwhile, Daniel was more absent than ever. His business was expanding, and his attention was focused on contracts and deals. He was always on the phone or catching flights, and even when he was home, he wasn't really present. I tried to tell him how I felt, but the conversations always ended the same way. "You know I'm doing this for us," he'd say. "Just a little longer, Evelyn. Things will get better." But they didn't. One evening, Adrian and I took a walk through the park. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the trees. We stopped by a bench, and as we sat there talking, he turned to me. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice low. Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft, hesitant, but it stirred something in me that had been dormant for years. I pulled away, guilt washing over me. "This can't happen," I said, but my heart was already betraying me. Adrien was staying at a hotel near the cafe, and one afternoon, he invited me to visit him. I told myself it was just a friendly visit, but the moment I walked into his room, I knew it was more. The first time, we sat by the window, drinking wine and talking for hours. When he kissed me again, I didn't stop him and gave myself to the moment of pleasure that drove me crazy in a good way. The second visit was during a thunderstorm. The rain poured outside as we danced in the dim light of his room, our bodies moving together as though we'd known each other forever. He held me so close, and we ended up on his bed. The third time, he cooked dinner for me. We sat on the floor, sharing stories and laughing until our sides hurt. By the end of the night, we were in each other's arms, lost in a world that felt like ours alone. It felt like paradise, and I didn't want it to end. For 7 months, Adrien became my escape. One weekend, Adrien planned a getaway to a nearby cabin. He said it was part of his research, but I knew it was an excuse to spend time together away from prying eyes. The cabin was nestled in the woods, surrounded by tall trees and a serene lake. We spent our days hiking, swimming, and talking about dreams we knew would never come true. One night, as we sat by the fireplace, Adrien looked at me and said, "I wish I could freeze this moment forever." I wanted to believe we could, but deep down, I knew the reality waiting for me back home. Daniel's business was thriving, but it came at a cost. He was more distant than ever, and I told myself it was his fault I had turned to Adrian. If he cared, he would notice, I thought. But the truth was, I didn't want him to notice. I didn't want to stop. One evening, Adrian asked me, "Evelyn, do you see a future with me? Or am I just a distraction?" I couldn't answer him. I didn't know what I wanted. Before I could decide, everything fell apart. Daniel came home unexpectedly one night and found my phone on the counter, unlocked. Adrian's messages were there for him to see, affectionate words and plans for our next meeting. "Who is he?" Daniel demanded, his voice shaking with rage. I tried to explain, but there was no excuse. He packed a bag and left that night. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel refused to speak to me. Then, one morning, I received a call. Daniel's car had gone off the road on his way to a meeting. He was driving too fast, likely distracted. He didn't survive. The guilt consumed me. I had betrayed him, and now I would never have the chance to make things right. Adrien tried to comfort me, but I couldn't look at him without feeling the weight of what I had done. "This isn't your fault," he said, but I didn't believe him. He left town a week later, and I didn't stop him. Now, I live in the shadow of my choices. I visit Daniel's grave every day, whispering apologies he'll never hear. I think about Adrien and the happiness he brought me, but all I feel is emptiness. Some mistakes can never be undone. Some wounds never heal. And some choices, no matter how small they seem, can destroy everything.